Alrighty, everybody, it looks like it is about that time for us to get started today. Let's give it a quick moment for everybody to jump in, but first and foremost, I just wanted to thank those of you in here already. We know your time's incredibly valuable as event creators, and I don't want to give you any fluff today to give you a quick agenda of what we're going to be covering. First and foremost, we're going to cover the best practices for marketing your events, tools that you have at your disposal as Eventbrite event creators. We're going to cover what exactly is Eventbrite Boost, what are some of the common marketing challenges that many of us face, and how do we overcome them. And then we'll take a specific dive today into Facebook and Instagram advertising for events. We'll show you what are the best performing people in our space actually doing, and then we'll show you how to create these campaigns yourself. So, to briefly introduce myself, everybody, my name is Sam Jameson with the Eventbrite Customer Experience Team. And over the last 4 years, I've been helping event creators of all different types of events, all different budgets, all different sizes, harness the power of social media marketing to ultimately sell out their events and bring people together. So, if you have any questions as we go along, I love for these to be interactive. If there's something I'm not covering as well or glancing over, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. We'd love to hear from you, and we want to make this an interactive session for you as well. So jumping into it, to give you a little bit of my background of how I got started in the event marketing space, I was actually working in a 1350 cap concert venue in the Bay Area. I was the in-house photographer taking pictures at all the events, and they needed somebody to help step into the marketing role. And I really empathize with many of you that might look at event marketing as something incredibly overwhelming, incredibly challenging, as trust me, I've been there before. Even 4 or 5 years ago, without a lot of these tools, things were really difficult. But I want to assure you that it doesn't have to be that difficult. And I want to help hold your hand to point you in the right direction of, based on the types of events you're throwing, maybe based on your marketing needs, what's actually going to be the most effective use of your time. And that's our main solution that we're trying to solve. But quickly, a couple of reasons why many of us feel event marketing is challenging. One, we know that we need to market, but we don't know exactly when we need to use these tools. Or we don't know if we are to maybe spend on an ad campaign, what timing period is going to give us the best bang for our buck. A lot of other tools are out of our price range or weren't really made for us in the event space. They were built for somebody that has $1 billion ad budget and a team of 50 interns to do their do all their dirty work for them. And then ultimately, we know many of you just don't have enough time in the day to learn these skills that you'd like to learn. And if we fully take the plunge and sometimes run an ad campaign, it legitimately feels like we're looking at hieroglyphics when we try to make sense of all the data. So, first and foremost, you can find all of the marketing tools included in Eventbrite. If you click over to the megaphone icon on the left, Eventbrite Boost is our collective of marketing tools that you have at your disposal as Eventbrite creators to help promote and market your events in the same place as where you're creating them. So, really, our main goal and the goal that we're committed to is to really create an all in one marketing platform so that you don't need to go to a million different places to do a million different things that sometimes we have to do when it comes to marketing our events, to give you suggestions on what you should do and what actually makes sense and help point you in the right direction. And from a data standpoint, what we've seen is creators that leverage the tools that we have inside of Eventbrite Boost. So that could be anything such as sending out an email campaign to people on your mailing list, or publishing your event to Facebook so that your customers can purchase a little easier, or maybe something like running a Facebook or Instagram ad. We find that the data supports that Eventbrite creators that use our platform are on average selling around 16% more tickets. And that could literally be as something simple as even using the publish on Facebook feature so that it's easier for your customers to buy. So let's actually break down the various features in Eventbrite Boost just to let you know like what's going to be a good use of your time depending on where you are as an event creator and what might not be an effective use of your time or budget based on your needs. So if there's one feature I could suggest for everyone to use, it is the share on social, the add your event to Facebook or share on LinkedIn features. And particularly I want to talk about the Facebook event feature just as from a sales standpoint, it's one of the most impactful ones that you could use. Normally when people buy for events, we don't buy immediately when we see an ad. We need repetition of actually seeing that advertisement. We need remarketing. We need reminders a lot of times in our busy lives to remind us to buy tickets for something that we're interested in. And if you don't want to spend any money on advertising, it can be difficult to remarket to your customers. If you don't have any ad budgets, the only ways that you're generally remarketing might be emailing your past customers or using social media to engage and interact with these customers. And the reason that you would actually want to use our system to make these Facebook events instead of going into Facebook and make them, one, it's going to save you a ton of time. So you don't have to copy and paste all this information. We auto populate everything for you. But second, we actually use the ticketing integration so your customers can buy tickets directly in that Facebook event. So from a buying process, it makes it really easy for those that want to buy. But from an organic remarketing standpoint, Facebook is actually going to remind anybody that RSVPs to that event that the event is coming up and that you should go ahead and get tickets. Especially if you're throwing events for an older demographic, Facebook events are really, really helpful. They don't cost you anything to do. To make one, it's only going to take around 1 minute of your time, but it does have a very beneficial effect in terms of helping you drive ticket sales and reminding your customers. So if y'all get any takeaway from me today, I'd suggest make this one of the first things you do after you publish your event on Eventbrite. Next up, we have our email campaign tools. Now, generally, the way that we use email marketing from an event marketing standpoint is we're sending out transactional emails about the upcoming events that we have. So, for example, if you are a creator with tons of different events, you have a pretty full calendar, you might be sending out every week to 2 weeks. You might be sending out an email that includes all the different Eventbrite events that you have. Now, one of your questions might be, why would I use this tool to send emails compared to maybe something like a MailChimp or Contact that I'm already using? First and foremost, if you're somebody that has a pretty small subscriber list, you're not one of the big dogs in terms of emails, the email platforms that you might be using can be pretty costly for you. And if you're not using it from outside of, if you're not using email marketing for substantially big lists, it can be pretty expensive. So we built this tool out. It's totally free for anyone to send up to 2,000 emails a day via the service. So if you're somebody that doesn't need to send out a ton of emails, this might be a nice cost saving element for you to use. And if you sign up for any of the paid plans as well, you can send up to 6,000 emails a day as well. So generally, if you're somebody I'm saying is probably maybe over having an email list of above 50,000, this might not necessarily be the tool for you. But if you're generally just looking this to send out kind of transactional emails about your events, you don't have the biggest event, or you have a smaller subset of your list that you could maybe send things to and then cut down on the existing cost of your email platform, I'd recommend checking it out. And one of the main reasons just why I find this feature important is from a click-through rate standpoint or an open rate standpoint, we generally see around a 30% lift compared to other platforms. And for those of you that don't necessarily know how kind of emails are ranked in email search systems, is based on the send address that it's actually coming from. If the send address is generally sending a lot of high quality traffic, like there's not a lot of spam or things like that, email platforms are going to favor showcasing that email. The lower likelihood it's going to go to spam. So you're basically tapping into Eventbrite's brand and trust. We tried to build this tool out in a way that people can't really send spam emails or things like that. So generally, these emails are ranked really high by search systems. We got Petty Theft in the chat. Tune in from California. I'm in Los Angeles as well, so pleasure to see a native. So interested in show promo on and off for Eventbrite ticketing, toned in and boost. Cool. So you're using Mailchimp and experience significant experience in toned in and boost in Facebook events. Always looking to learn more. So you are probably one of our resident experts today, my friend. So just any questions you have, feel free to throw them in the chat. The main thing we're going to talk about today is how to advertise on Facebook and Instagram using the tools in Boost. And we'll go through a little bit more detail. Why would you actually spend time doing this in our platform compared to just doing it in Facebook where it's totally free for you to use? So we'll get into that in a little bit. But lastly, I don't know if any of you are event creators that are throwing a very, very large number of events. Maybe I'm talking more than 3 to 5 events in a given location in a given month. If you are, I'd recommend check out the multi-event ad tool that we have within Eventbrite Boost. If many of you are familiar with the concept of calendar ads, where if we had 10 upcoming events, we would create a graphic that has all of our events and we might print flyers or get it in a magazine or a publication. You could think of this as the digital version. So it's a way that you could set up this automated ad that keeps itself updated with all events you have on Eventbrite. So you announce a new one, it gets added, an event sells out or happens, it gets removed from the campaign. It's kind of an always on campaign that just helps promote all of your events for a pretty cheap cost. A lot of people use this for remarketing to just easily remind those that bought tickets from them in the past, hey guys, we have an event upcoming this week, make sure to check it out, and it gets a pretty good return on your investment as well for advertising. So y'all, that's pretty much it for any of the features. Just wanted to take a quick pause here before we dive specifically more into the Facebook and Instagram features. Did any of you have any questions on the Facebook events, the email campaign tools, etc. in the platform before we move on? Just take a quick little water break. Cool, and feel free to drop in questions later if they come to you a little bit later. So first and foremost, just want to kind of give you a preview of where you can exactly find this tool within Eventbrite. So if you click over to the marketing tab over on the left, that megaphone icon, you'll find all the tools within Boost here. So if we click over to the ad campaign section, this is where we can get started creating the ad campaigns for our events. But before we go ahead and get started here, let's go ahead and let's take a look at a successful campaign to really highlight why is this platform actually different than just running it in Facebook? And then what is Boost actually helping bring to the table? And then what should you be concerned about when you run ads on Facebook or Instagram? So first and foremost, many of you that might have just ran an ad before on Facebook, like you saw that little blue boost button to put some money behind your post or your event, and then you advertised it. Generally, a lot of times, you're probably not seeing sales data from the campaigns that you run. So we can see up towards the top that this interface definitely looks different from what you're probably used to seeing in just Facebook Ads Manager. We really try to give you the metrics that are actually most impactful for you understanding how is your investment in advertising actually impacting your ticket sales and other event metrics. So up towards the top, you could see that this creator, they were running a campaign for their festival. They spent around 250 bucks on this, and they generated around $10,000 worth of ticket sales. So that's around a 42x return on ad spend, which is pretty crazy. So this is way above the average. Normally nowadays, the average return on ad spend is around a 1 to 2x. So I just wanted to showcase this campaign to really highlight like what did this creator do correctly, even if you don't see this exact return on ad spend. So first and foremost, one of the reasons why you would want to run things in our platform is if you haven't ever set up this Facebook Pixel, this tracking to actually track the sales that you generate, we actually handle that installation for you automatically. And we actually have ways that work around some of these iOS changes where it makes it really difficult for you to see your ticket sales because we're linked in with Eventbrite. Somebody buys on social media using the same email they use for their Eventbrite account, we can actually track these purchases. So first and foremost, from a data standpoint, you're going to be able to track the sales that your ads actually help generate, and you're going to get more visibility using this platform than you are just using Ads Manager by default. But ultimately, we would want to see how is this platform going to make me money and how is it going to save me time as well. So if we scroll down a little bit towards the bottom, lots of different numbers and rows on your screen, but each one of these just represents a different group of fans that we targeted with our campaign. So we could see we have these 4 different rows that just represent a different audience that we targeted with our ad campaign. Now, whenever you're just in Facebook normally and you run an ad campaign, if we're thinking about marketing like a big funnel, that campaign's doing a really good job of targeting the very top of the funnel. So kind of getting people that maybe don't know about our business or our brand to check out our event. But in most cases, there's no remarketing. So your customer or potential customers might see your ad once. They might think, oh, that's a really cool event. I'd love to go, but maybe the event's a couple months out. I'm not going to buy a ticket now. And if there's no remarketing, that person is ultimately not going through the funnel and purchasing at the end of the day. So one thing that's really different that our system does is without taking more of your time creating the campaign, we actually handle building a lot of these audiences on the back end based of data that we have from millions of other successful campaigns to actually craft a campaign for you in similar to what an agency might do for you. So if you hired an agency, they're probably going to ask you, Sam, what kind of data do you have access to? This is what we find works well for us. And they'll craft your campaign, A/B testing multiple audiences, and then moving the budget over to the winners. So you could think of an analogy as a lot of times if we just go and run an ad on Facebook, it's like we're going to Vegas, we're walking up to the table, we bet all of our budget on black. If it does well, that's fantastic, but if it hits red, we're completely out of budget and we wasted a lot of money targeting those that weren't actually interested and we didn't really have any remarketing. So the way that our system is going to make you more money is generally on average compared to Ads Manager. Most people see around a 20% lift in performance. So if it costs you around $50 to use the service every single month for a subscription fee, if you're spending around 250 bucks on ads or more, we generally through our optimization should be improving the return that you're getting from the ads so that the service basically pays for itself. Petty theft. So to clarify, to track conversions, that is only if the event is selling on Eventbrite ticketing and you own the event. So just for your knowledge too as well, if you were using a different ticketing platform, you could also install. It's called that Facebook pixel. So you'd install that Facebook pixel on the ticketing pages, and that's how if somebody clicks on your ad or views your ad and then goes ahead and makes that purchase, you can track that purchase. Now, the distinction or what's a little bit different with Eventbrite is we also use this other layer of tracking called offline tracking, which basically if somebody opts out of that pixel tracking, which many of you that might be using Apple devices, you might notice if you download a new application nowadays, it asks you, do you want to deny tracking or do you want to accept it? So what ended up happening with those changes is now people can opt out of this pixel tracking, conversion tracking. So when you're advertising Eventbrite events via our service, we have kind of another layer of defense that'll help track purchases even if somebody ends up opting out. But if you're, to get back to your question, if you are advertising events potentially on a different ticketing platform, the same process still applies. You just want to install that pixel. Normally you're getting that little piece of like pixel code, and a lot of tools have like a self-serve installation process that you kind of drop it in there, then go ahead and install it. Yeah, in many cases you can't basically ask a venue to install a pixel. I would say just it never hurts to as well, especially if you give them like a reasoning or an explanation as well. You could basically say like, "Hey guys, by installing this pixel for me, it's not going to do anything negatively on your end, but it will impact my ability to help drive ticket sales and bring people to your show." I kind of use that same case if like people are requesting advertiser access to somebody else's page that they're working with. Generally, sometimes that information, if you're like, hey, if you put this on here for me, like it's going to help us better sell tickets for your event. Sometimes people like that clicks in their head and then they'll give you access. But I know it's not feasible in every case to kind of go ahead and get that installed. So basically, I'll just to recap, like why would you use this over Facebook? One, you're going to have better visibility into sales metrics and then other metrics that are actually important to your campaign. Two, we're going to try to make you a better return from your budget by making sure that you're not wasting money on bad audiences, and then we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket, and that we're targeting audiences that statistically do the best job of driving sales. That's generally going to be the main reason, and everything's plugged in with your Eventbrite events, so it should make it a little easier and faster for you to build campaigns. So let's actually show you guys how to build these campaigns now. Please, as always, feel free to interject, ask questions as we go along here. Normally, the easiest place for you to go ahead and get started promoting an ad campaign is in the ad campaign section in this little strategy tab. All you'll want to do is go ahead and choose the event that you would like to market, and then you could hit the Get Started button to hop into building a campaign. To give you a little context on this graph that we're looking at in the middle, one of the most important elements when it comes to us actually advertising our events on social media is the timing of when we advertise those events. So to go back to my example, like my first experience in the event industry, I worked in a concert venue, and we generally sold the majority of our tickets within 1 to 2 weeks after the event went on sale, when there was hype surrounding the tour. Then ticket sales died down significantly, and then in the last week or two leading up to the event, when there's actual urgency, that's when we sold the next big chunk of all our remaining tickets. So one thing that you want to ask yourself when it comes to your decision to put money behind advertising, your decision to advertise, is really ask yourself and try to understand, if I were buying a ticket for my own event, when would I be likely to purchase that ticket? And we built this tool that'll actually help graph when your customers are normally buying. So we call this the sales curve. It's basically a visualization of when do you normally on average sell your tickets. So you could see from my events here that I sell a good chunk of my tickets right when the event initially goes on sale. But because I'm advertising online events, there really isn't a lot of urgency for people to purchase. It's a free event. It doesn't cost you anything. Um, people aren't worried it's going to sell out. So that's why then I see the next big kind of chunk of my registrations really towards the tail end of my event. So you'll want to go to this section and just try to understand and ask yourself, based on previous events you've thrown, like, when do my customers normally buy? And am I in a period right now where I probably wouldn't be likely to buy? Maybe I shouldn't spend a lot of money on advertising now. Maybe I should just do other organic marketing strategies. But then as we get closer to the event and I know people want to buy, then we could put some budget behind an ad campaign. So, even if you had the most perfect targeting, you had the most perfect budget, etc. If you and I just went into business, we're gonna throw an outdoor beer fest in the middle of like northeastern Canada in the middle of the winter 5 years out from now. No matter how much money we spent on that ad, we're probably not going to sell any tickets just because there really isn't urgency. So always consider that's one of the number one priorities on your end is figuring out like, okay, when do my customers buy, and then based on when they buy, when should I advertise? So let's go jump into the campaign creation process. Hopefully this isn't too much more complex than what you're doing on Facebook. And just to let you know as well, um, petty theft potentially, you might have been looking at kind of like an older interface. We recently made some updates to the ad creation flow. Those should be rolling out to existing users in a little bit. But main goal is like everything you're working with, just trying to make it a little bit simpler and faster. So the first step of creating our ad campaign is to define the interest that we'd like to target. So although Boost is actually including more audiences for you behind the curtain, the only one that you really actually have to configure are the interests that you end up targeting in this section. So guys, interest targeting is the most common form of targeting that we work with when it comes to Facebook and Instagram advertising. And it's a way that we can reach new customers that are interested in events or topics similar to ours. So for example, this is a music festival example. So the interests that we have in here are things like electronic music, house music, a couple popular artists in this genre of music. So generally you want to ask yourself like, what do people like that's related to my event? So if I'm advertising a yoga event, I'm probably going to do other interests similar to yoga, maybe health and wellness, meditation. If I'm advertising a boat cruise, maybe I might target people interested in cruises, people interested in nightlife, etc. If I was advertising a NASCAR event, I'd probably target people interested in cars, Formula One, etc. So generally just ask yourself like, okay, what are people interested in my event? And then you'll just type out words in this box to effectively see what you could target here in this section. Now it's kind of interesting. You can't target everything under the sun in terms of an interest. If let's try the my classic Billie Eilish example. So like Billie Eilish, top artist here in the States at the moment. If we type out Billie, the only Billies we can actually target are Billie Holiday and Billie King. So if you ever type out something here, it just doesn't show up. Unfortunately, it means Facebook and Instagram don't have enough data to allow you to target that audience. So what I'd recommend, guys, is maybe try to have around 5 to 10 interests in this box up towards the top. The more important thing is what's the size of the audience based on the location that you're actually marketing it. So if you're only hitting an audience size of like 5,000 people and you're in a place like Los Angeles, you're probably going to want to add in a couple more interests to maybe have this like upwards of 50 to 100K plus, just so you're reaching a nice size of audience. Because generally the smaller the audience, the more costly it actually is for you to market to them. So just to recap this section, guys, we will automatically populate some interests for you, but feel free to delete any that you feel are irrelevant, and then go ahead and type in a couple yourself in this section, probably anywhere between 5 to 10, prioritizing quality over quantity in this section. Then down below there, we can set a lower bound for the age range for our event. Normally, in my experience, what I found over the years is Facebook does a really good job figuring out who's buying or who's interacting with the ad or not. So if Facebook notices after a couple dollars to spend that nobody above the age of 50 is interacting with your ads whatsoever, it'll stop showcasing it to them. So the thing that I think is more important is just set a lower bound. So is there alcohol being served at your event in the States, and you have to set it to 21 and up? Just an easy way for you to configure that, and we'll pull in the locations of your event automatically. And the nice thing about event marketing, guys, is generally if you're throwing pretty similar types of events, like you're not reinventing the wheel with every event that you throw, the strategy that we use to actually market these campaigns can be really similar from every campaign to the next. So when I worked in a concert venue, My strategy was largely the same, but I would just vary some of these interests to reflect the genre of music that I was marketing. But if you're advertising outdoor beer festival related events, your targeting is probably not really going to drastically change from campaign to campaign. So you can always save an audience to use for future reference or have it auto populate every time, or even do things like duplicate an old campaign that you made. Oops, that is not the button that I want to see, guys. I am horribly sorry about that. Let me try refreshing this real quick. Go back to it. You got to deal with technology sometimes. I apologize, guys. Thanks for putting up with me. Cool. So the next step that we have is our budget and schedule step. So in this step, we are basically defining how much do we want to go ahead and spend on the campaign. Now, normally this is in New Zealand dollars right now, but for most people in the US, I'd recommend probably for a bare minimum budget for an ad campaign around 50 bucks. And in all honesty, I want to be really conscious of your time and conscious of your budgets. And if you're somebody that's probably spending less than like 250 bucks a month on Facebook ads, maybe this platform isn't for you in the interim. Just because, in full transparency, the cost of running your campaigns here is you basically pay Facebook for however much you want to spend on the ad. So whether that be 50, $100, $500, and then there is a monthly subscription fee for using the Boost services as well. The main goal is if you're spending enough on ads, with the optimization that we bring to the table, we improve your performance and totally cover the cost of your subscription. But so if you're not really spending a lot of money on Facebook ads, you're probably not going to see enough of that lift for the budget that you're spending, and it might make more sense for you to simply just run it in Facebook. But if you do that, please be very conscious that with the campaigns you run in Facebook, you might not have revenue tracking, and you also might not be remarketing. So you might want to look into other ways that you could accomplish remarketing, whether that be sending out emails or other remarketing methods, etc. And then after this, we're simply setting what's the start and end date for the campaigns that we're going to run here. So getting back to it, y'all, the schedule should really line up with when our customers are likely to buy. So if you know for fact that most of your customers really buy in the last week or two leading up to your event, maybe when you're a couple months out, you could run something like a Facebook event ad where you get people to your event so that they RSVP, so it reminds them about it. And then maybe in the last couple weeks, you can run an ad that goes straight to your ticketing pages. So we're kind of leading the horse straight to water when they're most likely to drink. So generally, guys, please put a lot of conscious thought into asking the question, when do my customers buy? What's the budget that I have to work with, and when do we actually want to spend this budget so that it lines up with when our customers are buying? So in many cases, this might be running some low budget ads leading up to when they're likely to purchase, and then eventually, like in the final stretch, when maybe a lot of people buy, that's when you scale up how much you're spending. Now, the last part of actually building your campaign here is simply customizing what does the creative look like. So first, let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of the creative and just highlight like what is the most important section that people normally look at. So science basically supports that our poor attention spans are around 2 to 3 seconds nowadays. I think on Facebook sometimes it might even be 1 second with how much content we're looking at every day. So the most important element of your ad is that image or video that you're using. In any case where you do happen to have a video, I'd probably recommend try to use that video over the image that you'd end up using, just because videos give more context as to the experience of the event. And when we're trying to sell an experience, giving more content in context is always going to be helpful. So I'd recommend you can roll with whatever image we auto-populate from your Eventbrite event if you don't have anything else to work with, but you could always add a variant or change up the image or video that you have here in this section. The next section is the text area, so the post text of your ad. This aims to give people context of why are they paying attention to your event. So first and foremost, addressing any sort of urgency. So our ticket's close to selling out, and I might not know that as your potential customer unless you explicitly state it somewhere. What is the event? Where's it happening? And when's it happening? We just want to give kind of the who, what, when, where, why somewhere in the ad, and the post text is generally one of the best places to put that. So feel free to rework the language that we have auto populated in here for you. It's pretty cookie cutter right here, and it works, but you would always want to brand your creatives more specifically to your brand in your brand's voice to have a better relationship with your customers that come across your ads. And then after that, normally the default is sending people to your Eventbrite ticketing page, but if you happen to have a custom link, so you need to advertise like a different ticketed event, or you need to advertise sending people to a main website or anything else, you can always put in a URL of your choice, so it doesn't necessarily have to be to your Eventbrite ticketing pages. And then if you also have a Facebook event, you could choose to run a Facebook event campaign instead. And to briefly talk about the differences, sending people straight to your Eventbrite event ticketing page is best when they're most likely to buy. But if people aren't likely to buy, or your demographic is really just primarily on Facebook in the first place, you probably want to run the Facebook events instead. And the reason being, they're almost the best of both worlds. So they allow people to purchase that are like want to purchase right away via the Facebook event. But if they're not ready, you're at least getting them in your remarketing funnel. And sometimes it's harder to get people in your remarketing funnel when you're directing them to a website they have to click on and then they leave their application. So that's the only thing there. Think Eventbrite event when people are likely to buy, and then Facebook event if most of your demographic is on Facebook, or you want to advertise in a period where there really isn't a lot of urgency. And then in all honesty, guys, you don't really need to change up the link headline or the link descriptions too much. You can probably leave these as is. These a lot of times are complete afterthoughts in your ad for the vast majority of people. And even on certain placements like Instagram, streams, and stories, they don't even always appear. So you can probably just leave those as is. The last thing you might want to potentially change would be that buy tickets button for the call to action that you end up working with here. Buy tickets is normally the best one from a sales standpoint to use, but if you're advertising a free event or something different, maybe something like a learn more or a sign up might potentially be relevant. And y'all, that is actually the last step of the ad campaign. The final step is the launch step. So this is where choosing basically, what's the Facebook page that we'd want to end up running that ad from? What is the ad account that we would want to finance and pay for that campaign with? And then you'll get a recap of everything else. So this section will recap, okay, who are you targeting from an audience perspective? And over on the right, you can see all the other audiences we're including. So we really only actually filled out this interest audience, but we're also including an audience targeting your past buyers and people that interact and engage with you on social media. We have another one that's helping you retarget people that are similar to everyone that's bought from you on Eventbrite in the past. And then another audience that's similar to those that interact with the events that you host on Facebook. So our system is trying to pick the best audiences from an empirical standpoint based on the data that you actually have access to and how these audiences have done for other creators. And then scrolling a little bit further, just the budget and the schedule and any variations or the design of the ad that you're testing. Yeah, so that's pretty much the entire creation process. Um, Got a question from Petty Thief. If you create an ad in Ads Manager, they need to push the idea that the link needs to be verified in the domain. So that when they're talking about like domain verification, Petty Theft, that comes down to when it's talking about conversion campaigns. So one of the big changes with the Facebook iOS changes was that if you wanted to run those conversion campaigns where you were optimizing for like a specific pixel event. So let's say you get this tracking set up, you have your pixel on one of your ticketing pages. So whenever somebody's opted in and it tracks the purchase, that pixel event fires off. Those conversion campaigns were basically a type of ad where Facebook used the data of these pixel events that it tracked, like purchasing, and would try to go after people that are very similar. No, no, it wouldn't do that. It would basically try to optimize your campaign to go after people that are actually making the purchases and triggering those pixel events. So what ended up happening when they rolled out the iOS updates was basically Facebook had to put out a requirement that you need to verify the domain if you want to run conversion ads. So most people nowadays, like probably 99% of our customers, we run normal link click ads. And one of the interesting things from a data perspective was there really isn't as much difference nowadays from a performance standpoint from running link click campaigns or traffic campaigns to running conversion campaigns. It just because Facebook lost a lot of data with the iOS tracking updates. So the performance kind of gap between those two have narrowed. So like in a lot of questions, you know, people don't necessarily go through the whole custom domain process. We do have the smart links like you're kind of talking about, so you could make like the embedded checkout on a smart link. Normally, like the main options you have for running conversions nowadays, just since you couldn't explicitly like verify and own the eventbrite.com domain, as Facebook only allows for like one real owner of that domain, is you could either set up your website to use the embedded checkout for Eventbrite. So if it was on like I don't know, if like pettytheft.com or something like that, and you use the embedded checkout, you could verify pettytheft.com. You own that domain, so then you could run the conversion ads, or you can use kind of like the smart links to effectively set up stuff. But in most cases, I think like the Boost smart link to redirect to your ticketing page, that's probably, especially if you're advertising multiple dates, probably a good way to go about doing that. Just because, sometimes it can be difficult to run it across everything. Yeah, exactly. Doing it with Boost Smart Links. You seem like you have a really good handle on your marketing strategy so far. Do you have any questions or any like strategy recommendations I could give? We're pretty much wrapped for today, so thank you for being our most engaged viewer as well. Feature requests. When will we see the status of the Facebook learning phase of the Facebook ad sets in the Boost interface? So, in terms of that, like, what data are you trying to get out of that? Are you trying to just kind of more like anecdotally, like, observe like how your ads generally progress through the learning phase, or is there like, specifically when an ad exits the learning phase, is there something that you kind of want to know from that? Yeah, currently at the moment you got to drill down in Ads Manager. We never really bake that into our interface or anything like that. Even kind of let you know the direction. Like we've tried to go moving it from a like to a more like simplified product. So like people like you, Petty Theft, you're like a pretty darn advanced advertiser, even like talking about things like learning phases, etc., and things like that. Gotcha. Ads don't really learn that well, perform that well until you leave the learning phase. In all honesty and transparency, man, I don't know if anytime soon that information is going to be added into the section. I could see potentially like in creative reporting, we are doing like overhauls, so that could potentially be baked in there. But in all honesty, man, I don't know if the engineering team is going to be putting that anytime soon. So I might still go about just looking at an ads manager as you normally have done so in the past. Awesome, y'all. Well, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to chat about today. And just for any of you still in here that are looking how to get started, just navigate into the Eventbrite interface, go over to that ad campaign section, and then you could get started. Petty Theft, one last thing of advice for you. I'd recommend if you're not already doing it, make sure you're publishing those Facebook events for everything that you create, even if you're not running like explicit like Facebook RSVP event campaigns, just because they do a really good job of helping build up your remarketing audiences that you're probably targeting in most of the ads that you're running as well. That's kind of the main piece of advice that I had for just most people that are looking for something to get started, but I'm assuming you're probably already doing that with how sophisticated you are. So, guys, thank you so much for your time today. Once again, my name has been Sam. It's been a pleasure. Just wanted to thank you for your time. I know there's a billion different videos that you could be watching, and we're also looking to really roll out and expand our education as well down the road. So if you ever have ideas of what types of webinars potentially or what types of educational content could we build upon to better enable you, always feel free to let us know, as we're always looking for feedback on how we can make it a better experience for you. But thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your Thursday and a blessed weekend as well. Take care, everybody.